I got two Hollywood actors and two researchers. Well, how's that possible if I'm only reviewing three podcasts? Well, I have that and all our controversial topics from the differences between men and women, uh, the killing the god of gravity, and of course, a little bit of Trump. That and more here on episode 17 of the podcast summary report. Stay tuned. Welcome back, friends, to episode 17 of the podcast summary report. We got three podcasts that are going to be summarized today, so let's dive right into them. The first podcast is Chris Williamson with an hour and 30 minutes and 54 seconds with Steve Stewart-Williams, an evolutionary psychologist that talks about the differences between men and women. Second podcast is the Joe Rogan Experience episode 2152 with Terrence Howard, Hollywood actor. Wrapping it all up with our third podcast, Jordan B. Peterson podcast, episode 450 with Dennis Quaid, another Hollywood actor. That one lasts us 1 hour and 15 minutes with 28 seconds. Okay, let's dive into podcast number one with Chris Williamson and Steve Stewart-William. He is an evolutionary psychologist that talks about the sex differences between men and women, nature, nurture, science, philosophy, etc. Everything along these lines. He's a college professor and researcher. He's been doing this for quite some time. And the main topic of this podcast, which lasted an hour and 30 minutes, was the main subject is the differences between men and women. Now, right now, that's almost a bit controversial. You can't even say we have to be the exact same thing. Well, that's not the case when it comes to this evolutionary psychologist, which is Steve. And he talks about all the differences between going our way back into hunting. Did men really do the majority of the hunting, or did women participate? Or how has that evolved throughout the years? As well as also just how we as men feel jealousy, women feel jealousy, difference, all those different things. But mainly, the podcast starts with just they start to discuss how we as humans want to uh, continue to push down our genes to the next generation, right? And that's our main goal. We want to, our cells, our genes want to procreate and then push it on to the next level. But essentially, we want to be grandparent machines, because if our genes just go on to the next generation and die off, we didn't do a good job. So what we want to continue doing is be able to progress through not just the first generation, but the next generation, and so on and so forth. So we have to be, if I want to have a successful life, let's say, I want to be able to push my genes through not just one generation, but the second generation. He talks about being want to be grandparents and so on. This is the topic really didn't deviate. They talk about all this across those 90 minutes. Like I said, they talk about the differences between men and women in jealousy, men and women in the way of thinking, men and women in the way that society works, and just everything around all those different uh, concepts, even in mating and preferences and those bizarre topics. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was an hour and 30 minutes. You get to see how a researcher, a professor, a psychologist, evolutionary psychologist still has, let's say, the guts to say this across social media and YouTube, and just stating with facts how we're right now two different sexes, men and women. We're different. We both complement each other, and it's just it's a beauty. It's a beauty around the world, and we can't be one way or the other. And just a nice concept to fall back a little bit into reality, right? To be able to say, all right, you know what? I'm a man. I'm different from a woman, and that's okay. So I like this episode. If you like this type of content, click on it. I recommend it to you. Very well. Moving to podcast number two, the Joe Rogan Experience with Terrence Howard. This one lasted 2 hours and 38 minutes. And for those who do not know, Terrence Howard is a Hollywood actor. He first got some great hits from the Mr. Holland's Opus, He was in Iron Man, the first one, and he was in Empire, etc. He had a long career in Hollywood before he had a bit of a scandal, drama, some domestic abuse allegations, and he was essentially canceled, right? But what he starts right away in this podcast, they start how he can just remember everything. He can recall everything, even from the time he was in the womb, uh, in his mother, and then from there. Uh, was born, was got some crazy ideas on how he was in some dreams was able to be given the solution for a lot of different things. Now he's become a researcher. He discussed kind of in the middle of the podcast how those domestic abuse allegations were was tearing up his life, but he now essentially sees that as just almost like the universe taking away that first career, which was acting, and then reverting him back to this research into this being able to solve these mysteries in the world, and just how interesting it is for him to be able to do this type of analysis, research, like science, back to science. Now, no kidding. I was really skeptical at the beginning of the podcast, and you can see a lot of reactions from this podcast online from other professors, other scholars, and everything, just calling him even a little bit of wacko. But you could see that he knows what he's talking about. You could see how he understands a lot of concepts that are not easy to be understood. He talks about the periodic table, how he came back to science. The difference between the regular linear periodic table that we've seen and we've been taught in school, and Walter Russell's periodic table, which is very circular and just dissects every element in this table by just multiplying it and with different waves and stuff, right? So I have a lot of different timestamps in my description, but if you enjoy just looking at this and different concepts, I talked about how he believes that this world is created by essentially two different things: electricity and magnetism, and how it's compressed or is it's been let out. So you take in something, you excel something, and he believes that the universe is that exact same thing. Even the planets, how the sun has discarded matter throughout many years, trillions of years, and then how this matter, this material has let's call it expanded out towards our solar system, and with every so many years, these planets start to get away, and he said that that's how our solar system got created, and that's how our world was created, and so on and so forth in those trillions of years. It's just a crazy concept, crazy way of thinking things, but very interesting. Terrence talks about his 97 patents, how he's continuing to do this, and how he's going to be remembered through his legacy, through these shapes. There's like a 20-minute, 30-minute discussion on the shapes and just the perfect geometry that they have, and the elements, how they link with each other, how they connect with each other. They're so to that very next level of very geometrically perfect, but very interesting. Like I said, 2 hours and 38 minutes. I actually do want to go back and listen to it uh, because the concepts are very controversial. Like it's almost like there is no gravity. Gravity doesn't exist. What it is magnetism, and we're pulled into the center of the earth, and electricity helps us break from that center. So a lot of different concepts, a lot of different things. It's not easy to listen to the very first time. You have to click on it for next time. But Joe really enjoyed the conversation. They closed the podcast by saying, "I want to do this. We can talk for 8 hours." So great episode. Very interesting. You can see how one person can break that paradigm. If you're good in something, you can be good in something else. And you can see how Terrence is very, very knowledgeable, very interesting. He's an author. He's got 97 patents. Just he goes his resume, or you want to call it, everything that he's done, and he's still got a lot more work to do. He's only 55 and looks really good in this episode. He talks about his transformation from actor to trouble in his life to becoming now this almost like a scientist. But more things to come from Terrence. If you really want to get your mind just shifted, listen to this episode. It's pretty interesting. Very well. Closing out our episode 17 with the last podcast, which is podcast number 3 that we're reviewing today. Jordan B. Peterson podcast, episode 450 with Dennis Quaid, with an hour and 15 minutes. Now, this was a quick one, and you can see how Jordan is enjoying. If you've seen my last episode, you can see how he's enjoying having these conversations with centered individual actors from Hollywood. He's done with Adrian Grenier, he's done with Brett Cooper, and now with Dennis Quaid, right? Well, they start right away discussing Dennis's new upcoming film, which is Reagan, and how he researched Reagan, how he liked Reagan, how he talked about Reagan, and how he just became into this actor. And because Reagan is kind of a Republican um, entity, he asked, "Hey, how you managed to pull that off right now in Hollywood with our current environment and just political discourse and everything?" Well, he talked about that he's always been an independent in Hollywood. He's voted for both parties in different situations, and just being able to be a self thinker and critical thinker. So Jordan mentioned how important that is currently in our time, not being able to let ourselves being manipulated by the media and everything. So it's very interesting conversation. Jordan dives into the politics and also dives into his career. He talked about kind of his favorite roles in his 100+ movie career. He's done more than 100 movies. He talks about it in the podcast as well. But when Jordan asked him, "So what's been the character you've struggled the most to leave behind?" He talked about Jerry Lewis when he portrayed that musician, and how he even had to do a little bit of rehab because just diving into that character left a lot of, let's call it, baggage behind him. But he's learned a lot throughout the years. He's done so many different characters in the spectrum, and just enjoyed his career throughout storytelling and just being able to be part of that industry, right? Be one of those original, you can even call it, movie stars. Uh, they dive in a little bit on the politics, a little bit. He shares his thoughts on Trump's. He believes that is his candidate. He even says that he's an a-hole, but he's my a-hole, and I'm supporting him. He endorses him. So right now he talks about how well, they both talk about how politics can even go too far, right? And movies shape the view we have on politics, shapes the view we have in our environment. So very interesting conversation. I like how how Jordan, it just continues to have these conversations with these individuals. Showed that shows us that Hollywood is not that broken, right? But Dennis has become more independent. He's become a producer in his own path. It doesn't rely on Hollywood that much. So that's interesting because you can see how these types of centered actors just are breaking away from Hollywood. So that's kind of how they close the podcast. It's only an hour and 15 minutes. As you know, Jordan has 30 more minutes with the Daily Wire side. So they were going to continue discussing the Reagan movie, the film, how he came into character and everything, when the release timeline and everything. So a good podcast. I really liked it, and I enjoy Jordan, how he just has fun interviewing these individuals, interviewing these researchers, actors, etc. So great podcast. But what I like to do at the end of each video is give you my recommendation. I've reviewed 3 podcasts today: a evolutionary psychologist, an actor turned almost a scientist, and another actor, which is Dennis Quaid, right? Stewart-Williams, Terrence Howard, or Dennis Quaid. Which one would I recommend you? I would recommend you Joe Rogan Experience episode 2152 with Terrence Howard. Great episode. I liked it. It challenged some of my thoughts. I'm an engineer, so even challenged the way I could portray things. Great episode. Click on it, but don't take my word for it. Keep listening. So, friends, hope you enjoyed this episode number 2 on the books. Last 2 episodes, click right here. Don't miss any of my episodes, and see you next time.